Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, brothers and sisters. Eid Mubarak. Today's video, I want to talk about an interesting experience that I had yesterday, and I would also like to share with you some of my thoughts on it as well. So yesterday, I went to an Eid event, okay, and I actually met up with one of my friends. And we were just ambling through the fields, the green fields. It was like in some sort of park. There was a lot of people bunched together in this certain place. They were chatting with one another. Some of them were cooking meat, right? We were waiting for that. And we're just talking with one another. And then my father introduced me to this other kid. And so we met up with them. We talked with them as well. And we're just, us three, the three musketeers, we're just ambling through the fields, talking with one another, that sort of thing. And, the new kid that we met suddenly turned to us and he said, "Are you guys Muslim? Like, do you believe in God?" And me and my friends were surprised. We were taken aback by the question, and once we regained ourselves, we said, "Yeah, we're Muslim. We believe in God." And when I asked him if he also believed in God, whether he was Muslim, he said, "No, I'm not." And in fact, later he said that he believed in evolution. Okay. And so that, that friendly conversation that we had suddenly shifted into this intense, fiery debate, okay, where, the two of us, me and my friend, now drew our guns, and it just turned into this big, wide battle on the field. No, I'm just kidding. It wasn't like that. It was a friendly debate. And, we talked about various issues, the problem of evil, the purpose of life, those kinds of things. And I came to realize after the debate, well, really today actually, which is why I wanted to make a video about it, which was about the ineffectiveness of debates, okay? Now, from my own humble understanding of a debate is essentially where you try to prove the other person where you try to prove that you're right and the other person is wrong. You might, come to them with a certain arguments, he might come to you with a certain argument, right? But you're trying to prove that you're right and that they're wrong, okay? The problem with debates, is that I think they're counterproductive, or they can have the opposite effect, okay? Because rather than getting the other person to accept your view once you've proved your own view, right? Once you've backed it up with strong evidence, and you've, made counter arguments against his own claims, rather than accepting your own view, right? Or, even like thinking about it in an open-minded way, he or she can get more defensive. And can resist any of the arguments that you put forth, And I'm saying this drawing experience from the debate that I had yesterday, from debates that I've heard, seen, from debates that I've had with other people as well. Now you might be thinking, okay, Karen, well, that's good and all. Then what should we do, right? Like if we're trying to prove something to someone, right? And the other person have their own arguments, what are we supposed to do, right? I think we could, rather than debating people, right, especially having like these like fiery debates, rather than debating people and trying to prove that they're wrong and that we're right, we should instead ask them questions that are within a sort of Socratic neurist framework, okay, that will eventually lead them to the conclusion, okay? So normally there's a conclusion that, there's maybe a certain conclusion that you want the other person to accept, right? You're providing evidence for it, right? You're arguing for it. Rather than doing that, you could, for example, ask questions to the other person, and within a Socratic neurist framework, you can make them eventually reach that conclusion. And the benefit of doing this is that instead of arguing with the other person and instead asking questions to them, right? And once again, doing this in a polite and doing this once again in like a polite way, not once again in a very aggressive, probing manner, just like in a sort of curious, kind, friendly way. By doing this, you essentially prevent hostility from arising, because the moment that the other person feels like they're getting attacked, they get defensive, and then that ends up like that ends up rendering the conversation or the debate, whatever it is, it ends up rendering it obsolete, right? It ends up rendering it void, right? It doesn't matter how much you argue with that person; they've already become defensive, right? This is the reason that I was really against Muslims who, I was against attacking Christianity. I made a video about this a few months ago, where I said that Muslims should not attack Christianity. Okay, now I don't know if you're aware, but there is a conflict between Muslims and Christians, right? So Christians attack Islam, Muslims attack Christianity, right? So it's just this never-ending cycle of conflict, okay, this never-ending conflict. And the problem with really attacking the other person's faith is that the other side gets defensive and he clings more tightly to his faith, right? And that prevents him from being open-minded to the other side, right? To what they have to say. And I think that's just counterproductive to spreading the message of Islam, right? That's why I made that video. And, sort of tying that with what I'm saying now, I think it would be better to ask questions to people, like not debate them. Because I've never had an experience, and if I have, it's been very rare, where, I debate someone, I prove that they're wrong, and then, they're just like, oh, well, that's a great idea. Or, you know what, you're right. I totally believe in what you're saying. It usually never turns out like that. When you have a debate with someone, when you prove them wrong, or for example, when I've been proved wrong, right? It's very natural for us to get defensive, right? To still, tenaciously, I don't know if that's the right word, but to still tenaciously defend our views, right? It's very difficult for us to admit defeat. So, I think that's why it's better that when we have these sorts of conversations, when we talk about these matters, whether it's about the existence of God, the problem of evil, I think we should avoid debating people, right? And we should lean towards more asking questions, right? Which will make the other people, reach that conclusion, right? Rather than trying to forcefully make them reach that conclusion, in which case then they end up resisting, right? So it becomes like a sort of tug of war, there's like resistance, hostility, right? So, that's what I'm thinking. This idea, I'm still like newly come to this idea, I've still yet to really ponder on the issue. I would also like to, read like Socratic texts to, learn the Socratic method, and maybe in fact like fuse it with the method of the Rasadi Nur, which can be in the future very helpful to when we have conversations with people about these matters. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about in this video. Also, I talked about this in my post, but I'm also going to release another video soon, inshallah, which is going to be about Eid. Okay, so stay tuned for that, and inshallah, I'll see you guys next time.